So I'm going to cover, quickly give people an overview of what's going on. I'm not going to go into the details of what we've done last time, but just to get everybody up to speed as to what the pilot is doing. Then I'll give a progress summary on year 1 and year 2 pilots, some lessons learned, and then go into a quick demo, and that'll be done within time frames allotted. So just to refresh everybody, the NSTIC pilots are to turn on a user-centric online identity ecosystem using an attribute exchange network, and to demonstrate trust framework components throughout that. The project approach has a variety of live interfaces with identity providers, attribute providers, and relying parties. We cover business, legal, technical, privacy, as well as security throughout this process. And the objective for each of the pilots is to be able to turn on up to 50,000 live user transactions per pilot, or 180 days, whichever comes first. So we have a lot of things that are happening in a short time frame. The base case for the pilots are to verify user-asserted attributes with users' permission. And we also do a series of out-of-band methods, or offer a series of out-of-band methods, such as SMS to device. And then the increasingly complex and advanced use cases have things such as OpenID, interoperability between credential types, and things, biometrics, as well as other types of device IDs. So that's what's going on. We're enabling this through the attribute exchange, which was originally designed to federate credentials for Web SSO. It is actually a federated identity as a service, a transaction hub, which not only will authenticate varying levels of credentials up to LOA 4, but it also does trust elevation on the fly of a transaction. So you can log in with a lower assurance credential and then elevate the trust. It is a marketplace, so we have a variety of different competing providers who compete based on coverage. It is a contractual hub, so we drive efficiencies in the market space by enabling the customers, who are relying party services, to have one contract with the exchange and then select from a variety of different providers based on price, coverage, quality, things like that. We have built-in privacy by design, so the user opt-in to every transaction. I'll show you in the demo a user management console where the user can control ongoing sharing of attributes with their relying parties. We have data minimization built into the transaction flows. The exchange as a transaction hub acts as a transaction proxy, so the identity providers, the attribute providers do not know from where the user came, although there's full audit capability in the way we manage that transaction flow. And last, we do not have a central data store of the user's personal information in our service. One thing that we did complete was, as a community at OIX, the OIX board approved a trust framework model, which was a guidebook. A lot of the folks on this call participated in that. And it was to how do you implement trust frameworks using an attribute exchange model, such as what we have used for the NSTIC pilot. So there's been good feedback between the pilots and some of the work done for some of the trust frameworks that are rolling out for this particular infrastructure. So just to summarize what's happened is the year end of last year, this was a very tight budget, as everyone who is a pilot participant knows, and has a large mission. So, what we found is that we were really aggressive on the original scheduling. We're rolling out what would be a disruptive strategy, having privacy built into the transaction flow with identity, which is a good thing, as well as federation technologies and decoupling the components of identity by provisioning. We also at the same time found our pilots we initially built out our system on Google App Engine, but we found our pilots wanted to go production, so they wanted a more robust infrastructure. So Amazon Web Services is now where we host our pilots in a FedRAMP compliant, moderate environment. And the other things that we found is that we have, by virtue of just rolling out with this ecosystem, some significant impact with our community outreach. We have a lot of lessons learned I'll talk about at the end. We have a well-defined mission in terms of use case types that are really ideally suited for what we're doing. We had some contractual hurdles that are coming to a conclusion I'll talk about in the progress. We have a large number of providers on the exchange, and that number continues to grow. I'm getting feedback. And then we have a variety of different use cases in 2014 with attribute-based access control and user-managed access requirements, which I think are really what I would call things that enterprises would be really excited about, but also very appropriate for consumer markets. So I'll talk very briefly about year 2 pilots that in some cases are going to be used to enable trust frameworks, exchange infrastructure, which are really federation use cases. And we do have some significant cross-pilot collaboration. So that's pretty much, and we really do look forward to, folks in the NSTIC, as they've been very, very helpful with some of our pilots and the IDESG community as we reach out to more willing parties in the next 6 to 9 months. So as of December 1st, here are the identity providers, attribute providers, and the various other providers on the exchange. We have high assurance credentials from some enterprises, as well as commercial services for LOA 3 and 4 from Verizon and Symantec. And those can be used using PIV or PIV-I or CAC cards in some cases. We have a variety of LOA 1 credential providers, as you can see there. Attribute providers include most of the credit bureaus and some of the telcos. We have a variety of other services that are in process or in pending. We do have some enterprise LDAP directories that are being used for attribute verification associated with the user's role or affiliation with a corporation. We have device IDs for laptops who have APM chips and for cell or mobile devices, tablets as well as cell phones. And of course biometrics, we're working with the DAON folks on bringing DAON as well into the XN. We have some other biometric providers in there for keystroke dynamics, and then some document proofing services. So that's who's on the exchange as of December 1st. The pilots actually will be leveraging a lot of these different services in the advanced use cases. For the base use cases, the attribute providers and identity providers are the ones that are being used today. So the first year, Broadridge, I will show you the Fluent platform is being rolled out in the first quarter of 2014 it's going to be rolled out on the Kindle platform. And then following that, the plan is to go to 2 other channels, iOS as well as Google App Engine, Google App Store. The second use, and that's a federation use case for investor communications. He is the second one I can talk to, but not show it to you. We have some restrictions on that, and they have a variety of applications moving to the cloud for partner and employee access, as well as the second use case that we're talking about for this year is a consumer-facing application. DHS FEMA is rolling out in January, first or second week of January, with a first responder use case on an incident response portal. That's a collaboration portal that will be used across various states, significant disasters, such as what happened in California with the fire, as well as up in New York and Massachusetts as well. eBay is a use case we worked really hard to get to. This is one of our lessons learned we'll talk about. For seller registration, eBay has told us they do not want to, at this time, enable federated login with third-party credentials. And so there are some commercial opportunities we're exploring with them, some attributes, but at this time we're going to put those guys on hold for the pilots for this year. Our second year pilots are actually very exciting. The first one is, again, another pilot awardee, but a separate use case for supply chain federation. And we demonstrated this live where we had a Raytheon, Boeing, and Lockheed executive log in with their level 4 credential to the exchange into a SharePoint service, which had actually a Zacamol engine behind it so that each participant only got to see the documents that they were supposed to see. That was actually what we're doing here for this use case across the supply chain, and we're in the process of identifying the specific service. The census is one of our pilots for 2014, probably around the June, April to June timeframe, where that will roll out for a demographic survey. probably in the Maryland and D.C. area. You'll be able to pre-register via the exchange, and then with a single click, come back in, sign on, and complete your documents. That'll be some really interesting use cases that I'm pretty excited about. I believe the feedback we've had is very, very positive. You have a GE use case number 2, which is consumer-facing. Broadridge, proxyvote.com is still in process. And then we have a couple of backups because we have a variety of commercial partners that are RPs that are in the process as well, who may be interested in actually participating in one of the NSTIC pilots. But I think at this point we've got the landscape covered with the pilots that we're working for this year and for 2014. So the general lessons learned are, again, RPs are the customers. So we work very hard with each relying party from a business, legal, technical, privacy, and perspective. And in some cases, with multiple relying parties who are trying to use federation to enable communities of interest in their community. That's both happening at Broadridge and General Electric, and I think we're going to see it more often as we go and roll this federation platform out into the marketplace. Online retailers are really, it's really interesting. We've talked to a dozen. They're very excited about what we're doing for a variety of reasons. However, they're very, very sensitive to anything that changes user experience. So having users opt in or use third-party credentials, they're probably not going to be an early adopter, but I think as we roll out across large communities, Broadridge has 140 million investor accounts, for example, and GE is a very, very large supply chain. The census, of course, if we were fortunate enough to line up for the 2020 census, would expose what we're doing to everybody or most people who are doing the census online. I think emerging trust frameworks are really being driven by communities so far. I think everybody's talked about early adoption of that and the process flow. We've defined a really well-defined process for that. Credential federation really requires everybody in the relying party to sign up and get engaged and get up to speed. So we've had some delays in that process, but I think we're on track getting our contract signed. By the end of this year is our target for a couple of those folks that are still in the final throes, but that will not delay our schedule for next year. We actually have done a lot of work in data minimization with both identity providers and attribute providers. We actually manage the data flows very, very carefully, so only the information that a relying party requests for us to verify about a user who has asserted that data is actually going to be used to generate claims about the veracity of that data. The user is always involved and can opt out at any point in time in the process flow. We have gone through a rigorous process for privacy evaluation. It's a large spreadsheet, and we're excited to actually be able to report that, because it turns out that a lot of the relying parties are very excited about being able to go to their constituents and describe exactly what's going on in the marketplace from an identity perspective. And I think we've heard Kathy very articulately talk about risk mitigation and, where there's a lack of consistency and effectively where there could be a lot of work done here, and we're excited about participating in the communities that are working on that today. From a contractual perspective, we've actually had a lot of work. We've done a lot of work with the attribute providers, and that is, we've had to negotiate some things out of our contract because we have a standard set of flow-down terms to the relying parties who sign up, and that is, some security requirements for the relying parties, because we are acting as a transaction hub, that we have the security requirements as opposed to the relying parties that we're interfacing with, although data handling is definitely part of the flow-down term. Auditing of the systems that the RPs have and the record usage. Well, we provide a full audit trail, so that wasn't something that had to actually be flown down to the relying party contracts. Also, it's important to note that the RPs, the attribute providers want to know who the RPs are, but they really don't need to know the user's relationship, and so we were successful in negotiating that out as one of the terms. So we've actually begun to move some of the contractual structures in the community. We've had to consolidate lots of contracts and spend a lot of time. We have a full-time attorney who's been working diligently day in and day out on pulling all this ecosystem from a contractual perspective together. I think that helps trust framework providers because they can readily just take what we've built from a framework and then add some of their policies specific to their community. One of the other lessons learned is that we really need to make sure that we're sensitive to whom the RPs are providing a service. So you may be, for example, treating relying party services exposed to employees a lot differently from vendors, partners, customers, and then the public. And as you extend federation out, the number of considerations involved in the life cycle of identity and credential access management is really important to define the purpose and the posture of the service that's being exposed. So the Attribute Exchange Network allows, in bold here, some new capabilities even within employee services, such as attribute-based access control or federated identity proofing. But as you get into the public exposed services, that allows you to use a social identity, but then step up in the context of the flow using a higher assertion process, such as a biometric from DAON or device ID check or picture password ID to verify that is really the user who is trying to move $10,000. I'm going to quickly go in. How much time do I have now? Just quickly.
I think we got about 8 minutes left.
Okay, I'm going to quickly go into a demo and then I'll be done. So can you see my browser? Yeah.
I'm sorry, 5 minutes, Dave.
Okay, can you see my browser?
I can.
Okay, I'm going to, this is a mock relying party, a brokerage. I'm going to log in with a Google credential. The first thing I do, I'm logged into Google, so let me log out. First thing I do is log into Google. This is a live system, so with OAuth, you get an OAuth challenge. The user accepts that, and then I put in my name and information. I'm going to show you the benefit of doing this the hardest. This is setting up an account the first time. So this is like any account you might set up online, where the relying party says, hey, provide some information to me. And once I click to confirm, effectively then I get, in this context, requirement to put in a PIN code. And I do that, complete that process. So that does sort of an out-of-band proof that you have a device in your possession. Now, here I am. I've basically been authenticated, created a new account with Fundamentals. Using this federation service, I can now, as a user, track and manage the attributes that I've shared with Fundamentals. So that's the first use case. Now, the second use case is I'm now going to log in with my mobile device to Fluent, which is the Broadridge platform. And in this context, this is on my mobile device, as you can see it on there. When I click on register or log in with Google, the Exchange recognizes that I've already created an account. So it's asking me for additional information, which I will obscure for purposes of privacy and bring it back in, if you don't mind. So just to show you, it has already gone ahead and filled in from the Exchange with our means, and it's asking for one more attribute, which is my date of birth. And I don't think you want to see that, so I'm going to enter it offline for a second. Yep, hold on. Okay. Confirm to proceed. And I get another PIN code from this application. Okay. So what I'm showing you now is the Broadridge Fluent application, which is a federation application. So I went through a one-time sign-in for getting access to this process. When I'm in Fluent, what I'm showing you is a federation of different companies. They have a timeline process for messaging to the user, and there's a federation of different companies that are now participating in this platform. You can get individual messaging from your broker-dealer and do searches across things. If you want to log in to create a new account, this is a native app. Basically, I have to log in through a web service app and sign in to Google using my mobile device. Come on.
Hey, Dave, we're down to the last minute.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty much done. But when I do this effectively, I get a single sign-on event after that. All right. So what I'm trying to show you is that the exchange, actually, let me just put that in there, is tracking the user's information throughout the environment so that when the user comes back in, logs in, then you effectively have a single track. Now, last thing I wanted to show you, I think that's it. So we are live and operational with our pilots at scale in Amazon Web Services. We are, as everybody else is saying, interacting with a lot of different relying parties across the ecosystem. The exciting part is that we've been able to work through some of the hurdles and implement real interactions with their back-end systems, as well as coming up in the first and second quarter with live users. So I think that's all I had, Chairman.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Now we can open it up for questions. Once again, you can either unmute your phone and speak up or chat. John Workey says, "Go Packers." Or Tony Romo. All right. Do we have some questions? Hold off a minute since it usually takes a moment or two for these to evolve. Actually, I have one question that popped up earlier. You were talking about the trust framework guidance that you were talking about. I think, was that the attribute? What were you referring to, trust framework guidance, earlier?
So I guess the community that has been working at OIX for about 18 months in June submitted to the board for approval the OIX Attribute Exchange Working Group document. And that's a framework by which communities can implement trust frameworks using an attribute exchange network. So that's the document. It's available if you go up to oix.org. You can take a look at that document.
Yeah. Next question from John, aside from talking about the Packers, is he wants to know what standards are being used as at the foundation of the system.
So we support OAuth, OpenID, SAML 2.0, RESTful services of various types. We use HTTPS or TLS, if you will, for the transport layer. There are a lot of different standards that we're using. We are at the Attribute Exchange Network layer a transaction hub that is an API, a set of APIs that are standardized and exposed to the different participants.
Thanks. Any other questions for Dave? Keep things open for just one more minute. We actually may make up a little time if not. All right, not seeing any other questions. Dave, thanks a lot.
Welcome.
And we are going to hand things over for the next 20 minutes to Glenn Klingenstein at Internet 2. Oh, sorry, there was one more question for Dave. How will this be priced to the general public? I'd actually ask that's probably a good thing to address to Dave offline, since all of our pilots, one thing I should clarify is while we're funding the pilots, giving them seed money to get off the ground, they are cooperative agreements. Most of the pilots are putting in their own things as well. We're really looking to catalyze a broader marketplace of solutions, and so we expect the good models are the ones that will have a very logical pricing model for, if not members of the public to get to. I think what's really important is that you have relying parties that are willing to pay for this to help bring in their partners. But we can bring that question up again since this is the one that's come up a couple times in terms of how pricing is going to work in the general questions at the end. So let's hand things back off to Ken in the meantime.